Ladies and gentlemen, by popular demand, we are talking about 10 albums that I hate with all my heart. My top 10 most hated metal albums of all time. And before y'all start bitching, I want to make it very clear, you asked for this. So at no point do I want to hear, you were too mean on this record, or you'd be kind of a, you're an elitist, loser, liberal, I don't want to hear it. Because you asked for this. So let's jump right the fuck into it. Just a heads up as well, this is not a numbered list. This is not best to worst or worst to best, if that were even possible in this scenario. We are simply going to talk about each album in order of release. So albums that came out years ago, like say for instance in the 80s and 90s, we're going to talk about first. Whereas albums that came out more recently, such as say, I don't know, last year, we're going to talk about last. I'm not really sure why 80s and 90s was the example I jumped to, because the first record we're talking about was released in fucking 2000, but whatever, y'all get the idea. With that in mind, I suppose let's officially kick off this list with that aforementioned record from 2000, Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water from Limp Bizkit. So full disclosure here, I fucking hate Limp Bizkit. I fucking hate Limp Bizkit with all my fucking heart. If we were doing a worst band of all time list, this would be number one for me. There is not a single redeemable quality about this band as far as I'm fucking concerned. I hate the fucking music. I hate the fucking production. I hate all of their fucking lyrics. And I fucking hate Fred Durst. What a fucking annoying white trash shit stain of a human being. I hate his vocals. I hate his pissy attitude. I hate everything about him. The way he raps, the way he sings, it's so genuinely fucking irritating. Every time I hear, "It's just one of those days," I want to literally drill a fucking nail through my head. I hate this band so much that I would not hesitate to throw every single album they've ever made on this list. But I'm specifically choosing Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water because, in my opinion, not only does it have some of their corniest, edgiest, and most cringeworthy fucking material, it's also the fucking longest and therefore the most fucking painful to get through. 75 minutes of some of the most dated, annoying rap, rock, nu metal garbage imaginable, conceivable, not just in this universe, but in every possible universe. There is no alternate dimension or timeline where this album is even fucking listenable for me. I hate the edgy fucking butt rock and rap metal of Rollin' and Get Your Groove On. I hate how fucking sappy and pretentious and generic It'll Be Okay is. I hate the corny antics of Hot Dog, and I especially hate My Generation. I hate how Fred Durst prances around acting like the toughest fucking dude in the world, acting like he's got the biggest fucking dick in the world. I can't fucking stand it. You wanna talk shit about me? About my generation? Fuck yeah, I do. You fucking suck. I fucking hate your guts. Fuck Fred Durst, fuck Limp Bizkit, and fuck this fucking album. They are a pimple on the dick of rock and metal history. They are a long and uncomfortable fart. They are worse than shit. They are explosive post-Taco Bell diarrhea. Next up, we have the infamous Saint Anger from the one and only Metallica, perhaps one of the most critically appalled records of all time. Kind of a bold statement when you consider that Metallica have not been on a hot streak for the last I almost want to say 20 years, but I almost want to say 25 years. Maybe longer, depending on who you ask. Even the most casual heavy metal listeners are at least semi-aware of this album and its issues, and as such, I shouldn't need to go into great detail as to why this album is such garbage. You already know about the awful lyrics and vocals, you already know about that fucking brain-dead guitar work, and you most certainly already know about the absolutely awful fucking sound mix on this record. You most certainly know that everything sounds like it was recorded in a literal fucking garage, that the drums sound like they were recorded on literal fucking trash cans. It's so bad, it's practically a fucking meme at this point. But truthfully, my biggest concern with this record has always been the very simple fact that Metallica's heart and soul is not on this record whatsoever. They are, for lack of a better term, phoning it in on this fucking thing. I can't blame them entirely for that. They were going through a lot of mental and emotional stuff at the time. They were coming to terms with their alcoholism. They were dealing with a weirdly nasty split with Jason Newsted. So I get it. There's some bullshit that has bled over into the album's writing, recording, and production process. But respectfully, acknowledging that unhealthy atmosphere and environment does not make up for the utter fucking tripe that is Saint Anger. Especially not when you remember that this is not the first time Metallica have been thrown through the ringer. They'd lost bass players in the past. They dealt with alcoholism in the past. They just couldn't really deal with it in a constructive way here. Say what you will about Death Magnetic, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, Load and Reload, and yes, even Lulu, but at the very least, Metallica's heart and fucking soul were in those records. They're not here. Plain and simple. When I reviewed every Metallica album for a special video a few months back, I gave this a 0 out of 5, and I fucking stand by that. Hell, this is a prime example of a fucking 0 out of 5 record. Next up, we have yet another critically reviled darling, this time Illud Divinum Insanus from Morbid Angel. To be honest, I didn't really think this album would end up on this list, at least not when I was initially constructing this thing. I considered records from Immortal and Burzum, but I was worried that that would come across as biased. I was also considering records from, like, Falling in Reverse, but then upon re-listening to some of those records, I kind of went, they're terrible, but not that bad. But when the time came to re-listen to this, everything just kind of clicked. I almost out loud said to myself in utter disgust, Robert, how the fuck could this not be on your list? I would be committing a crime by not including this album on this list. A fucking sin. This thing is far more atrocious than I fucking ever remembered it being. Half of this album is some of the most overproduced yet underwritten death metal I've ever heard in my entire life. It is so loud, it is so fucking compressed. It just kind of throws walls of bland, generic death metal riffing and explosive percussion at you, hoping that you'll ignore the fact that there's no actual substance to anything going on, hoping that you'll go, whoa, this is so brutal, without bothering to recognize that it's a terribly written and constructed fucking piece of music. And the other half of this album is a strange, puzzling, and cringe-worthy static Exian industrial metal mess. It is fucking atrocious, man. And just so we're clear, the issue is not that Morbid Angel had the audacity to bring industrial and death metal together at last, because there are plenty of bands that have done exactly that and have done a pretty damn good job at it. Fear Factory comes to mind, Anal Nathrak comes to mind, as do bands that have experimented with industrial and other subgenres of extreme music, like Code Orange, Agoraphobic Nosebleed, and so many more. The issue is, it's just fucking shit. Plain and simple. Honestly, a lot of this sounds like if Corey Feldman tried to write an industrial metal album. It's also very pretentious and corny at times, especially when we get to numbers like Destructos versus the Earth and the absolutely cringeworthy, over-the-top, Broadway-style industrial rock schlock of Radical. Fuck that song in particular. It's as if these guys said to themselves in the studio, hey, what if we found some way to fuse Ministry with Diablo Swing Orchestra, and then we took a fucking fat shit on it? Of all of the albums we're talking about in this video, this is probably the only one that most, if not all of us, are going to agree on. I have yet to meet anyone face to face who genuinely enjoys this thing. Apparently Jamie Horsley does, and I would genuinely love to know what he hears in this record that the rest of the world is missing, but that's another topic for another video. It's crap. What more do you need to know? It's fucking crap. Next up, we have the Path of Totality from Korn, which was actually released only 2 months after the aforementioned Divinum Insanus. Yeah, that was not a great year for metal, in retrospect. Not a great year at all. Similarly to that album as well, Korn is trying to explore more electronic music on this album and infuse it with their more typical brand, except they're exploring EDM. They're exploring dubstep and rave music. The idea itself kind of makes some sense to me. It does feel like a weirdly natural pairing. Both genres emphasize a lot of thick and hearty grooves. They both encourage a lot of moshing and a lot of dancing, a lot of jumping up and down, and it's worth noting that a lot of EDM producers grew up listening to bands like Korn, so in theory, this is actually kind of a clever idea. In execution, however, the Path of Totality is an utterly baffling and confusing record from start to finish. It is extremely obnoxious, extremely irritating, and perhaps one of the most overproduced records in the history of rock and heavy metal music. Filled to the brim with electronic grooves and percussion and murky guitars and Jonathan Davis's usual vocal antics and tricks, it's a genuinely overwhelming record at times. The album has too much energy, it is too hyperactive, it is too over the top, it has way too much going on within a relatively small amount of time. It's like a kid with ADHD hyped up on Halloween candy. Remember that episode of Futurama where Fry tries to drink 1,000 cups of coffee and ends up going fucking insane? That's this album. That's this album in a fucking nutshell. And this is all without even addressing the lyrics, some of which stand out as some of the stupidest Korn has ever put out. The track Get Up in particular, featuring the one and only Skrillex, has to have one of the most irritating fucking hooks I've ever heard in any song ever. I remember too, for a while there were quite a few rock bands that were experimenting with EDM and dubstep. I remember Muse even had a lot of that influence on their album The Second Law, but I think this album pretty much killed that movement, and thank fucking God for it. Alright, so I'm pretty fucking certain that I'm going to be in the minority on this. I am pretty fucking certain that I am the only motherfucker who hates this album with this much fucking passion and sincerity. But so be it. It's my list, my channel. Y'all voted for this, so here we go. The next album is Time 1 from Wintersun. If you need to step back and get yourself a drink, go for it. I totally understand. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I don't have a watch. Why am I doing this? Alright, you get that out of your system? You good? Okay. Alright. Let's talk about how fucking awful this album is. This is truly one of the most pretentious records I've ever heard in my fucking life. Filled to the brim with nonsensical guitar wankery and super spacey weird keyboards, so proggy, so cool, and some of the worst percussion and some of the worst fucking editing and sound mixing I think I've ever heard on like a modern power metal, melodic death metal album. As far as I can tell, the approach was quite literally, let's just throw a bunch of shit on fucking tape, and then we'll try and convince the entire world that it actually means something, and they need to get pumped up for this massive series of epic concept albums that we're about to unleash upon the world. Which, spoiler alert, they never did. And that's kind of another issue I have with this album. It's such a cynical and obvious fucking con job and no one seems to see it. Like, for years, Wintersun has been grifting money from people, putting it into either terrible material like Time 1, or putting it into material that has nothing to do with the material that they've been promised, like the Forest Seasons, or whatever the fuck that album was called. Joke's on you, Metal Meltdown, when Time 2 gets released, that'll show you, it'll blow your mind, you fucking poser. Yeah, it will blow my mind, but not because it'll be a good album, but simply because it'll fucking exist, because, spoiler alert once again, there is no Time 2, and at this point, I don't think there ever will be. I've said this before in a previous collaboration with Quest for Metal, and I'll say it again. The day that Wintersun releases Time 2 is the day I eat a fucking t-shirt live for the world to see. You can fucking quote me on that if you like. You can put that on a t-shirt, and I will eat that aforementioned t-shirt should that day ever arrive. Go for it, because, again, guess what? That day will never arrive. So fuck it. I've gone a little bit off topic, so whatever. Time 1, it's a cheesy, stupid, over-the-top, bloated fucking mess, overproduced and simultaneously underproduced, some of the worst power metal and melodic death metal I've ever heard, pretending that it's the most epic and powerful piece of fucking shit ever put to tape. It's essentially the Batman v Superman of modern metal, a confusing, pretentious, and unnecessary mess, promising an epic storyline that we will never, ever, 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 ever fucking see. Ugh, halfway through the list, this calls for a drink. It is 10:30 in the morning, and I am swilling Jack Daniels straight from the fucking bottle. Like a fucking champion, may I add. Next up, we have Wretched and Divine, the story of the wild ones from Black Veil Brides. This one is so bad it's almost kind of hilarious. I've hated this album for a long fucking time. I always thought it was yet another incredibly pretentious, overproduced concept album. Wow, I'm noticing kind of a common theme in this video. Huh. It's pretty much the typical Black Veil Brides radio metal schlock with the same lyrics about rebellion and believing yourself and we're strong and no one can stop us, and this time around they tried to attach like a really weird and underwritten story to it. Like, to this day, I still don't really know what the fuck is happening about this album. Like, there will be these little interludes where they're like, well, we did it. We won the war. And that's how we won the war. And then the resistance, it did the thing. And I'm just kind of like, when the fuck did that happen? Y'all were just talking about how you're bulletproof, or you're fallen angels, you're rebellious, and where the fuck did this war come from? Like, as far as I can tell, there's kind of like a civil war brewing in like a Fallout-esque dystopian society, but I don't know if that is what's going on. I can't really pick it up entirely from the music itself, which is a big problem because guess what? When you're making a concept album, the concept has to make sense. If you're gonna attach a story to the album, I have to understand the fucking story, plain and simple. When I listen to American Idiot from Green Day, for instance, I know exactly what the story is. I know who our characters are, I know what they want, I know why they are who they are, and I know what happens to them by the end of the album. They actually spell out the main character quite clearly in the track Jesus of Suburbia, where Billy Joe literally says, I'm the son of rage and love, the Jesus of suburbia, from the Bible of none of the above, on a steady diet of soda pop and Ritalin. There. Done. He's a fucking edgy street punk, and he fucking hates the world, and his fucking dad's an asshole, and his fucking mom's an asshole. I get it. Boom. Understood. There's no moment like that whatsoever on Wretched and Divine, and as such, I hated this album when it came out. Do I still hate it now? Yes, obviously it wouldn't be on this list, but on some level I also think it's kind of hilarious at the same time. I mean, it's so spectacularly bad and poorly executed that it's genuinely kind of funny. If I ever held a TED Talk on how not to write a concept album, I would simply play this album from start to finish. Oh, and of course the music fucking sucks, because And he's a fucking lame, piss-poor singer who can't sing a note above this monotone, gruff thing, even if it meant saving his fucking life. The guitar work sucks. It's just generic Avenged Sevenfold style twin guitars. It's, you know, the usual Black Veil Bride's Drek, except now it's a little funnier thanks to this ridiculous, poorly explained story. Next up, we have Torment from 6 Feet Under, which should not be a gigantic surprise, because I fucking hate 6 Feet Under. Y'all should have known that at least one 6 Feet Under album was gonna end up on this list. Now, truth be told, I wasn't initially sure which one it would be. Initially, I thought it was gonna be one of the Graveyard Classics records, but then I re-listened to Nightmares of the Decomposed and I thought, wow, maybe it should be this one. But then I re-listened to Torment, and as such, I feel more than comfortable saying that this is the king of shit mountain. This is the cream of the shit crop. This is truly the worst of the fucking worst of the fucking worst from a band that consistently puts out the fucking worst stuff. This thing is just so fucking lazy. This has to be some of the most generic and unenthusiastic death metal I've ever heard in my fucking life, with some of Chris Barnes' worst fucking lyrics, some of 6 Feet Under's worst fucking guitar work and percussion, and their worst fucking production. Even the album cover doesn't walk away clean. Look at this fucking thing. What the fuck am I even looking at? This looks like it was assembled in Photoshop in a fucking minute. This looks like the rejected alternative cover for Dance of Death. It's just utter fucking shit, man. I mean, my god. And it's so fucking boring, dude. Like, as bad as all of these albums are, the only one that almost put me to sleep was fucking Torment. From Separation of Flesh and Bone to Exploratory Homicide to the remarkably, almost revolutionary lazy cut Skeleton and Bloody Underwear. Chris, this is your genre. This is your wheelhouse. This is what you do. You've been doing this for almost 40 fucking years. Hell, more than 40 years as of this recording, and this is the best you can come up with? Skeleton and Bloody Underwear? The fuck is the matter with you? I honest to God think I wrote better death metal when I was in college and high out of my fucking mind. And everything becomes downright pathetic when you realize that Bloody Underwear is actually supposed to be a sequel to the iconic Cannibal Corpse track Fucked with a Knife. Why? It's simple. Because Chris Barnes wants to pander to your nostalgia. He wants to remind you that there was a point in history when he was in an objectively better band. And he's hoping that that'll convince you to look at the album and go, hey, this isn't so bad, because it reminds me of old school Cannibal Corpse. Nice try, Chris, but I would listen to literally any single old school Cannibal Corpse song 20 fucking times in a row before I ever choose to listen to Torment ever again. Which, I guess, unfortunately I did in preparation for this list, but I suppose I can fix that by listening to a bunch of old school Cannibal Corpse, so fuck it, it works out, I guess. This is 6 Feet Under's worst studio album, and quite possibly the worst death metal album ever released. Next up, we have Beloved Antichrist from Therion. We actually talked about this record somewhat recently when we reviewed Leviathan from Therion. As such, I'm going to try and keep this relatively short, which should be easy because I don't really have a lot to say about this record other than, my god, what an absolutely boring and tedious fucking experience from beginning to end. Over 3 hours of some of the most underwritten and overproduced and pretentious power metal, symphonic metal fucking garbage imaginable, trying to masquerade as something so epic, so powerful, so wondrous. Fuck no, fuck that, fuck you, fuck Therion, fuck this album, moving on. Here's a great idea for a drinking game. Listen to Beloved Antichrist and take a shot every time you either A, want to fall asleep, or B, want to fucking shoot yourself in the back of the head. Next up, we come to an album that might inspire a little bit of debate, not because it's a particularly well-received record, but simply because it's not technically a metal record, but has inspired so much hatred. It has fanned so many flames that I almost feel like we have to mention it. It is the one, the only, Nostalgia Critic's The Wall. No, it's not a metal album. It is based on an incredibly influential rock album, and it features collaborations with Rob Scallon and Corey Taylor, two notable figures in the modern rock and metal scene, but all things considered, no, it is not a metal album. But who fucking cares in this instance? This album is so bad it fucking transcends fucking genres, dude. And let me be clear, I am perfectly fine with a comedian wanting to take a little bit of a goofy jab at classic rock and even Pink Floyd. That's not the issue. The issue is that Doug Walker isn't trying to take a lighthearted jab. He is actively trying to fuck with this record. He is actively trying to destroy everything that makes this as important, as dynamic, and as influential as it is to metal and to the broader spectrums of rock and progressive music. What he calls thought-provoking satire and parody on this album comes across as genuinely cruel-hearted slander. It becomes very clear very quickly that Doug Walker doesn't actually have anything to say about The Wall because he doesn't actually understand anything about The Wall. He doesn't understand how important it is. He doesn't understand what happens in the actual storyline of the album or the movie or anything else associated or attached to this project. He's just acting like some kind of arrogant, edgy, hipster comedian trying to get cool points from a young audience that doesn't understand or doesn't care about this music. Yes, satire is about making fun of something, but satire also usually comes from a place of love. Like, Spaceballs was made out of a love of Star Wars and Star Trek. This was made out of hatred and confusion and a genuine mistrust in Pink Floyd and a genuine misunderstanding as to what The Wall is and what it stands for. It barely qualifies as satire, but if it somehow still is, it is easily some of the most poorly constructed satire ever conceived, and that's without even getting to the main point that most of his actual written material here is basically just, the wall is long, this part is annoying, this is the song that everyone knows, this is stupid. That's literally the whole joke of the album. Doug Walker going, that right there? That's fucking dumb. Say what you will about The Wall, and for that matter, say what you will about Pink Floyd. They're not my favorite band, to say the least, but I think we can all agree that at the very least, they are way better performers, way better musicians and songwriters than Doug fucking Walker, who cannot carry a fucking tune to save his goddamn life. His little musical skits might be tolerable in the context of a fucking 10-minute review, but across a nearly 40-minute album, my god, does his voice get fucking grating fucking quickly. And yeah, let's talk about Corey Taylor's contribution to this album. The completely out of place, utterly unnecessary, and outright stupid inclusion of the SpongeBob theme song performed acoustically by the Nostalgia Critic cast and crew and Corey Taylor. What the fuck? That's all. That's my official review of that one part. What the fuck out of 5. I don't picture this being a particularly controversial statement, but fuck this album. Fuck Nostalgia Critic. Fuck Doug Walker. Just fuck everything about this album. And last but most certainly not least is Torch the Faith, the debut album from the one, the fucking only, Psychosexual, an album that, similarly to Nostalgia Critic's The Wall and Divinum Insanus, is critically reviled and appalled and has been rejected by just about everybody on the fucking planet. Why is that? Simple. Because it's stupid. because it's so fucking edgy, because it's so fucking cheesy, because the music is fucking atrocious, because Devil Daddy is such a weird fucking guy who writes such weird and genuinely creepy, borderline misogynistic music. It is an album so overtly sexual and genuinely clueless that it comes across as the brain-dead ancelic child of Marilyn Manson, Slipknot, Rob Zombie, and Evanescence, all wrapped up in a remarkably silly and clumsy package that, to some extent, almost reminds me of Angelic to the Core from Corey Feldman. Almost, that is, because as terrible as this is, it never quite crosses over into that territory of being so bad that it's kind of amazing. Instead, it's just kind of bad and uncomfortable and gross and creepy. You feel genuinely bad listening to this fucking thing. The lyrics range from sappy to genuinely psychotic and fucked up, to the point where if another human being said this kind of stuff to me, I would have them locked up in a fucking asylum. As this Devil Daddy figure, who, by the way, is Jeremy Spencer from Five Finger Death Punch in disguise, fantasizes about raping and abusing and harassing young women basically until the point of death. Stalking them, obsessing over them, kidnapping them in the dead of fucking night, and doing ungodly fucking things to them without their consent. Look, I'm fully aware that metal is not a particularly PC genre, nor do I ever expect it or even want it to be an especially PC genre, but that doesn't mean I really want to hear about this 50-year-old man fantasizing about raping and abusing and murdering women. You've got a wife and kids, man. Get your shit together. Aside from that, the way Devil Daddy actually describes sex itself is genuinely kind of weird and puzzling. He sounds more like a teenager who's trying to talk dirty for the first time in his life, but he got all of his dating advice from the Pornhub comment section. And yeah, of course the music is fucking crap. So many sappy fucking goth rock piano ballads and stupid edgy industrial rock ragers. I still believe with all my fucking heart that Let the Sin Begin sounds like an absolute ripoff, note for note, beat for beat, of I'm Afraid of Americans from David Bowie, which in and of itself I would still argue is more offensive than anything else this album could possibly throw at me. Like, how fucking dare you, Psychosexual? How fucking dare you? What more can I say, folks? It's just an awful fucking record. It only came out last year, and yet I still feel very comfortable including it on this list. That should tell you right away just how utterly fucking horrid this record is from start to finish. I gave it a 0.5 out of 5 when I reviewed it, because for some reason I gave it some credit for being objectively better produced than some of the Devil Daddy solo stuff. That was a mistake in retrospect. This is a 0 out of 5. This is a sinful record, an insultingly awful, genuinely kind of offensive record. And booyah. That's it. 10 albums. My top 10 most hated metal albums of all fucking time. The Jackie Daniels is definitely starting to hit me a little bit. And it's only 11 in the morning. Oh my god. I need to take it easy. Especially when I have to do a lot of stuff today. This is all getting boxed up because I'm moving. So I really shouldn't be drinking this. Thank you for watching. Feel free to get upset, but if you do, just remember, you voted for this, so, you know, deal with it. Grow up, be an adult. Let me know what you think are some of the worst metal albums of all time. Tell me what some of your most hated metal albums of all time are. Press this button right here if you aren't already subscribed so you can get updates on the channel immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.